material miseries. So the problem is that we forget our eternal constitutional position. Our position is explained in Bhagavad Gita 15 chapter 7th verse by Lord Krishna. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Once we forget our eternal position, we become influenced by the three modes of material nature, and they act upon us respectively. Specifically, the soul gets covered by the false ego, mind, intelligence, and the body forgets its eternal position. The three modes affect the self. The mode of goodness causes one to have temporary happiness. The mode of passion causes one to overachieve. And the mode of ignorance causes one to become delusioned. From Bhagavad Gita 14, chapter 6 to 8th verse. We can get back out of this influence of the modes and understand our eternal constitutional position by understanding the points for how to see correctly, a real philosophy. Philosophy, as per Sanskrit, means understanding the constitutional position of the soul. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 13, chapter 24th verse. One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. The points of philosophy are as follows. Number 1. The supersoul accompanies the individual soul in all bodies, and the body is destructible, but the individual soul and the supersoul are eternal. Point 2. The supersoul is equally present everywhere in all living entities. Point 3. All activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and the self, the soul, actually does nothing. Point 4. One must not see different identities due to different material bodies, and must understand how beings are expanded everywhere. Point 5. The soul is transcendental, eternal, and is beyond the modes of material nature. Even though it is in contact with the material body, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled by the modes of nature. The sixth point. The soul, which is situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, despite being situated in the body. Point 7. The soul, not matter, illuminates the body by consciousness. So the living entity actually suffers when it forgets about its real position. However, once it understands these points, it becomes self-realized and no longer suffers from the three modes of material nature because it understands the eternal position. We must also perform devotional service. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 7th chapter, 6th verse. The material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth. In simpler words, Krishna says that the material miseries of the soul, which are too much for him, can be handled by performing devotional service. This is the most important point for making sure that the soul does not get affected by the material nature.
Very good. Very good. Now, what we're going to learn today, I'm going to discuss this a little bit more in depth. However, what we want to learn today is tolerance in the face of suffering. There are many examples in India and in the West. There's an example. Yeah? Oh, okay, let me hear it.
The living being, though transcendental to the three modes of material nature, still suffers. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1.75 it says, the living being is by condition constitution transcendental to material engagement. But he is now imprisoned by the external energy and therefore thinks himself one of the material products. And due to this unholy contact, the pure spiritual entity suffers material miseries under the modes of material nature. One who surrenders onto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna is set free from the modes of material nature by the order of the Supreme. This is the way of getting relief from the bewildering ways of the illusory energy. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1.75, it also reveals the surrendering process. By the influence of association of saintly people who have realized the Supreme, the conditioned soul gets a taste for hearing about the Lord. And by such hearing only, he is gradually elevated to the platform of respect, devotion, and attachment for the Lord. The whole thing is completed by the surrendering process.
Okay, very good.
And the question was, why are people suffering even though the soul is eternal and transcendental? The answer is, people are suffering because they have forgotten their eternal position and they want to be a controller. Based on their karma, they get a specific type of material body in which soul suffers. Although soul never changes by coming in contact with material nature, but he is now imprisoned by the external energy. And therefore he thinks himself one of the material products. Hence, soul undergoes through material misery. Due to this ignorance, soul is suffering. Although soul is not doing anything and body is doing something by the influence of material nature. The second one was how to get out of that suffering. Answer, we can get out of suffering by surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord. We can surrender by associating with saintly people and rendering devotional service. Process of devotional service is also explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.23. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Swaranam Bhasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atma Nivedanam.
Very good. Samart.
Assignment. Explain how the soul is transcendental, but it can get affected by the modes of material nature. Reference verses. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.7.5 and 6. The soul suffers because it thinks of itself as a product of material nature. The soul thinks of itself as the body, but is transcendental. Actually, the soul is the marginal energy of Krishna, and when the soul understands this, it gets out of suffering. We can understand the actual position of the soul by doing devotional service to Lord Krishna.
Good. Thank you. So today we're going to study tolerance in the face of suffering. And there are several examples that we can cite. One is Haridas Thakur. And another one is Jesus Christ. Actually, there are many examples in ancient India. There's one example that we know of in the West, that's Jesus Christ, but there are many examples. So, if you become Krishna conscious, does it mean that you don't feel any pain or suffering? No, it'll still be there. But it no longer stops you from being Krishna conscious. Another example is Prabhupada. Third example is Prabhupada. So, homework is you look up Haridas Thakur and see how he tolerated suffering. And Jesus Christ, see how he tolerated suffering. And Srila Prabhupada. See how he tolerated suffering. Okay? Haridas Thakur, yeah. Okay, so it was mentioned that when the spirit soul comes into unholy contact with the modes of material nature, what does that mean? Unholy contact. Well, what does holy mean? Yeah, but it means it's something spiritual, right? Like, does your soul have a spiritual contact to Krishna? What verse in Bhagavad Gita could we quote that would explicitly say that the soul has an eternal contact with Krishna? Hint, you mentioned it already as part of the verses that you were reading. Right, what does it say? Mamayavamsa jiva loka, jiva bhuta sanatana, malaksastan indriyani, prakriti stani karsati. Okay, so that says that Mamayavamsa jiva loka, that the spirit soul is part and parcel of Krishna. Mamayavamsa jiva loka, jiva bhuta sanatana, and it's eternally part and parcel of Krishna. Right? And also, Mamayavamsa jiva loka, jiva bhuta sanatana, malaksastan indriyani, and that the soul is connected, gets this unholy connection. It's not a spiritual connection that's eternal. When it says unholy connection, it means it's a temporary connection. It's not eternal, right? Malaksastan indriyani. Due to the very hard struggle for existence, the mind and the senses and the soul becomes entangled or conditioned by material life. Although the soul is transcendental, although the soul never suffers, but by its association with the body and false identification with the body, whatever happens to the body affects the soul. Now, what is the struggle for existence? The struggle for existence is that your soul is eternal, but it's in the material world, which is the atmosphere of non-existence. Non-existence means that everything material in the material world appears, stays for some time, gives off byproducts, begins to dwindle, and then disappears. So that non-existence is referring to material things, like you have a shirt, and then eventually you throw the shirt away. Then you have a car, eventually you get rid of the car. You have a house, eventually you get rid of the house. And you have fingernails and hair, and things like that. They come, and eventually they go. right? And you have the body. It comes, and eventually it's going to go. So this coming and going, it means that things, material things are existing in an atmosphere of non-existence, right? Now, when our soul develops an unholy, unholy contact through the false ego with the material nature, what happens is that a struggle for existence begins. What is the struggle? Exactly, it is the desire, it's coming from the desire to dominate and control nature. And why is that a struggle? Because nature cannot be controlled. It belongs to Krishna. It says gunamai. Nature means also the three modes that are acting. When there's a manifest universe or state of vyakta, manifestation of matter, the matter actually belongs to Krishna. Bhumirapo nalo vayukam manobudire evicha. Krishna says, 7th chapter, 4th verse, earth, water, fire, air, and ether or space are my separated material energies. And then he also says mind, intelligence, and ego. And these energies, they seem separated, but they're not. They actually belong to Krishna, but they look separated because Krishna never touches the material nature. He can appear within it, but is never subject to any influence of it. So therefore he says it's separated from him. Just like if I'm speaking into the microphone and if you tape this or if you record it, now years later I might not be around, but you can listen to the recording. So that recording is my separated energy. I'm not there, but the recording is there. I spoke it, you hear my voice, but I can be very far away. So this unholy contact that the minute soul can have with material nature, we're conditioned, it's due to the conditioning of the three modes of material nature. And what is it? It's a constant struggle. It's a constant struggle to wake up early every day. It's a constant struggle to come to the temple on time. It's a constant struggle to go to work. It's a constant struggle to earn money. And then when you earn money, it's a constant struggle to keep the money and try and make it grow. And it's always struggle. There's competition, fierce competition, and we have a body that's subject to miseries caused by the body, miseries caused by other bodies, misery caused by cataclysmic events that we have no control over. And so it's a struggle. And why are we struggling? Because we're trying to dominate, control, and enjoy the material energy that belongs to someone else. It belongs to Krishna. So whenever you usurp something that belongs to someone else, you become guilty. And you get pursued by the police. So who is pursuing us? Yamaraj is pursuing us. And through the law of karma says, whatever action you perform with selfish desires, there's going to be a reaction that's negative. So the key word there is selfish. If you work for Krishna without any selfishness, and you're only interested in pleasing Krishna, then you're freed from the struggle. But if you work and not understand that everything belongs to Krishna and not use things in Krishna's service, then you suffer. You struggle. It's not easy to, it's impossible to overcome the material nature. It's not easy to control the material nature. Just like sometimes there's a hurricane. Can the United States government with the strongest army in the world stop the hurricane? No. They just sit there and wait till the hurricane destroys everything. And then they try and fix it again, right? The hurricane or the flood or the earthquake, or a viral disease, or a tidal wave or a tsunami. They can't do anything. They have the strongest army in the world. They could throw atomic bombs that wouldn't stop it. Right? They could throw 5 or 10 atomic bombs to stop the tidal wave. It still wouldn't stop. Or the hurricane. So they just wait and see everything get destroyed. And they say, well, this is just part of life, so now let's rebuild it again. You know, but actually, it's not normal to be subjected to this type of punishment. And whenever there's punishment and suffering, you should understand, it's a message from God telling us that we're doing something wrong. It's a message from God telling us we're doing something wrong. And what is it that we're doing wrong? We're not using the material energy in service of Krishna. It belongs to him. If we use it selfishly, we become a thief. And the thieves are going to be punished. So, this unholy contact. We have a holy contact. That is, our soul is part and parcel of Krishna. But the unholy contact is to think, oh, I have no relationship to Krishna, and Krishna doesn't exist. It's just a fairy tale. I only have contact with matter, and matter matters. Matter matters. And matter does not matter. It's not relevant when we use it selfishly. It's only relevant when we use it in service of Krishna. So, when a person does become spiritually advanced, suffering is still there, because as long as you have a material body, there's going to be suffering. But one develops tolerance, unbounded tolerance. So when Jesus is nailed to the cross, or Haridas is beaten in 21 marketplaces in the town he was living in other words, you usually die after 5 or 6 beatings, 5 or 6 different marketplaces, right? But he sustained 21 terrible beatings, didn't die. In fact, he got more enthusiastic. And the people that were beating him, they begged him, please, sir, the king said, if we don't kill you, then he's going to kill us. So die, please. You know, we got families, we got kids, and it's not fair that we're going to die like this. He said, oh, okay, I'll die. And it looked like he died, but he just went into samadhi. He stopped breathing. And the king came and he looked at him and I think he kicked him to make sure he was dead. And Haridas Thakur didn't move. He said, okay, now throw him in the Ganges, get rid of that filth. The Muslim king said that. They threw him into the Ganges, and he went into the Ganges and he went down a river and just got out of the river. And that night he went back to see the Muslim. I don't know if he was a king or a magistrate. He was a magistrate, I think. And knocked on his door. And when the Muslim opened the door, he screamed, ah! You know, you're dead. He said, no, I'm not dead. But you're going to be dead very soon if you keep hurting the Vaishnavas. He said, don't ever punish any Vaishnava again. Otherwise, you'll die immediately. And he was like shaking and was all afraid. But you know, they saw Haridas Thakur was beaten terribly, and he died. But now, he's still living, and is acting as if he wasn't beaten at all. And Haridas Thakur himself was a little confused, why he didn't feel as if he suffered. So he went to see Lord Chaitanya, and when he went to see the Lord turned his back to him, and he saw that all the beating he received was actually received on the back of Lord Chaitanya, and he was spared the suffering. He was beaten, but he was spared the suffering. He was able to tolerate it because of the Lord's protection. So you can read this history. It's in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so a devotee can develop unbounded tolerance. Why? Well, you perceive suffering through the mind. You receive suffering through the mind. All the sensations of the senses are transmitted to the mind. But if your mind is fixed on Krishna, then you can tolerate that suffering. Now, there are actually examples of this. One example is Stalin, the terrible dictator of Russia. He didn't trust anyone because he killed so many people. He knew that, many people hated him. So he didn't trust anyone. So he had to have a very serious operation in the late 1940s or 1950. And because he didn't trust anyone, he refused to take the what do you call it? They give it to people so they don't feel pain. Anesthesia. He refused, and it was a very painful operation. They had to cut him open and everything, and he was just staring at the doctors, and he didn't even scream. And the doctors were freaked out. They'd never seen anything like that. But see, he was so afraid that they would kill him that he refused the anesthetic. See what happens when you're a dictator? It's not fun, because he killed so many people. He killed like 30 million people. 30 million, at least, probably more. 20 million men died. And the Russian men died in World War II. And then he killed more people by starving them to death in Ukraine. He's a very terrible guy. Right? Don't mess around with people like that. But because he killed so many people, he knew a lot of people wanted to kill him. Right? So he refused the anesthetic. And they did open surgery on him. And he was just staring at them the whole time. You see what a demon he was, right? So it is possible to withstand tremendous suffering. But he did it not because he was meditating on Krishna. He did it because he was afraid that they would kill him. So he was willing to suffer all that pain. But when a person transfers the mind to thinking of Krishna, it is possible to tolerate all kinds of suffering. Mental suffering as well as physical suffering. Okay. So even the demons. So so these are three devotees: Haridas Thakur, Jesus, Srila Prabhupada. Now I want you to name three demons. Okay, number one is Stalin, who suffered tremendously and tolerated it. So you have Stalin, you have Hiranyakashipu, and Ravana. Three big demons. So you don't have to write a whole story of each one. I mean, Stalin, you just heard it, but you can give a little 1 or 2 line explanation of how Hiranyakashipu suffered and how long he suffered, and Ravana. When you do tapasya, you actually suffer austerities. And some of those austerities are very, very difficult. Like staying in freezing water, meditating in freezing water in the Ganges in wintertime. Or meditating in a cave in the Himalaya mountains in wintertime when everything is freezing cold, really cold. Or sitting down and being encircled by fire on a hot day in summer. That's another tapasya that yogis do. Can you imagine? I mean, already it's a hot day. It's like 100 degrees. And they build a fire around them. They just sit there and meditate, not moving. So you imagine doing things like that. It's like unbelievable. But yet they can do it. by controlling the mind. Well, the devotees control the mind by meditating on Krishna, and the yogis, they control the mind by meditating on nothingness, or the light. So another devotee who suffered was Prahlad Maharaj. It's another devotee who suffered. He was only 5 years old. So your homework is explain what the unholy contact is, and explain the devotees who suffered and some demons who suffered and tolerated it. Jai Shri Radha Nilamadava Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I have a lot more to say about this, but we're going to stop right now because I have a lot of other things to do today. So you have your homework for Wednesday, and come to the class I'm going to give tonight. It'll be a very interesting class that's on this subject. And you can take notes in the class also tonight. And it'll help you answer your homework. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Shri Radha.
Govindam Adi Purusha